James, thank you for joining me.
Good to be here, John.
I've been really looking forward to this.
Likewise.
Tell me, who is James Collier?
Who is James Collier? That's the question. Why don't I answer this a different way? Why don't I start from the now and work backwards?
Love it.
Okay. So most people know me as James Collier, co-founder of Huel. I'm a registered nutritionist. I've been a nutritionist for 30 odd years, showing my age. And more recently, I'm an author. Let's rewind. Huel was founded about 10 years ago by Julian Hearn as the principal founder and me as co-founder, the nutritionist behind Huel. I now run everything sustainable nutrition, so everything to do with the nutrition side of thing and the sustainability side of thing. Although sustainability isn't my area of expertise, we have other people in the business who do that, but I've got a keen interest in it, and that's manifested into my ideas in the book. For people that don't know what Huel is, it's complete food, so it's nutritionally complete food. We have powders, the RTD, the ready-to-drink bottles that people will see in the supermarkets across the UK. We've got bars, and we've got the hot and savoury, which you mix with hot water and eat with a spoon. And we're all about providing good, complete nutrition in convenient, affordable format. But all the products are plant-based and have a low environmental impact too. But let's rewind before that. James Collier before that worked in the bodybuilding and fitness world. I started a website, muscletalk.co.uk in 2000 with a friend, and it went quite well. This was before social media, and it was a forum where people post comments, and it wasn't smartphones back then, and people would go online and do things a bit more thoughtfully. You could argue that forums were the beginning of the end of the world, but with because there was polarization there, and there was negativity, but it was slower and not as negative as social media can be these days. And that went quite well for a few years, Muscle Talk did, but then social media came along and we lost a bit of traffic because of it. And we changed the format of what we did. Rather than having other companies advertising with us only, we also started selling our own nutrition products and supplements and clothing, and it didn't quite work out for us. But during that era as well, I was also a promoter in the bodybuilding scene, used to run bodybuilding shows myself. And that was quite hard work for very little reward, looking back. Rewind before that, I started a nutrition consultancy, which was giving one-to-one dietary advice, or writing, or doing talks, seminars, or say meal plans for care homes, for instance. It was always a supplementary income. It was never a big source of income, and it wasn't a huge part of my work, but it did cross over a lot with what I did at Muscle Talk. So I'd see bodybuilders. It
was entrepreneurial though, wasn't it? There's a thread of entrepreneurial kind of prowess here where you were trying different things.
And I've also missed out a lot of the other businesses during the bodybuilding. So, I had a clothing brand, which was really good quality clothing, but we just never took off because clothing's hard, and a few other things as well. And it was through the consultancy, which was always there, that Julian Hearn found me in order to bring me on board as part of Huel. But before that, then I was an NHS dietitian for about 7 years, working at a couple of hospitals, doing things like helping people with weight loss and food intolerances, but more on the wards with people with eating difficulties, maybe stroke rehab or enteral feeding, if the nasogastric tubes or the PEG tubes, to support people there. And then before that, obviously, was nutrition degree, and before that was growing up. And yeah.
Well, tell me, it's all fascinating. So the why for me, I've sort of got to know you before today.
Okay.
And listened to and watched different things where there was clearly a big influence through bullying and not feeling like you had any strength and muscles to then want to turn that into, I'm going to be super strong. And you've clearly carried that on now. You look ripped.
Well, ripped, yeah, maybe.
So that physical fitness, if you like, was coming from a mental point of view. And then you had your mum diagnosed with, was it cancer?
Yeah, when I was 8.
That's super young, but she lived to see you do your first year at university through changing her habits, and you went into your own spiral of trying to research and learn anything that you could to try and help her live longer. Have I got that right?
I didn't, remember passed away when I was 19, so I didn't have those skills then, but I do put the two factors that I got into nutrition down to the two things you mentioned.
Which is a serious why, right?
Yes, it's really a serious personal why. Yes, it is. And when I was 8 years old, Mum was diagnosed with what I later found out to be terminal breast cancer, although this was the 80s when medicine wasn't as good, but it was still good, right? The work the NHS did kept her alive for 11 years before she passed away. But she changed her diet and her mindset during this period, and that was definitely had a positive influence on me. It's the first time I'd heard the C word when I was 8. You know, what's cancer? And explained it to me, and a lump. And shortly after that, she became a vegetarian. She followed this style of eating, yeah, and a lot of good food around the dinner table. And there was a lot of discussion around nutrition around the dinner table. I mean, her mental strength was very important there, and the food choice. There were some really good and nutritious foods. The other side, like you mentioned, John, a lot of teenage kids and young kids are bullied at school, but it affected me in quite a big way. I did go to a private school, so maybe it wasn't as physical as it could have been, although it definitely was sometimes, but it certainly affected me, and I hated it. And I really hated feeling like the little guy, the skinny guy. So when I was 16, one of my best friends, still one of my best friends today, he, a couple of years older than me, he introduced me to weights, and I never stopped, and I'm still doing it now.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's great. And I wanted to do anything I could to try and improve my knowledge, to get bigger muscles, because more knowledge equals bigger muscles. That's the way it definitely works, right? So I thought I'd go, when it was time to go to uni, I could have done economics. I'd done that at A level, and I did quite well at A level. Or I could have do a nutrition degree, and I went with the logical one. I went with the passion one. It turned out the passion one was the logical one, because I've had a career in nutrition for 30 years.
Yeah, excelling in it. And also, it's following your passion, right? So you went into something from a nutrition point of view because of a really, really sort of bad situation, like with your mum ultimately diagnosed with cancer. But you've ultimately then gone through a journey that's probably allowed you to be super knowledgeable, and now you're sharing that with others, whether that's through Huel or whether that's through the book that ultimately gets released tomorrow, where you're giving knowledge. I'm someone that's always trying to be the best version of myself, right? I keep fit. I do what I do in the gym. I walked here like you today. We could have got the tube or a cab, but we chose to walk. You get in the fresh air as much as you can in London. But from a nutrition point of view, for me, looking into that whole space, I can't wait to read your book and so on, like I've read others. It's a bit of a minefield. So if I was to say to you, let's just stay on that topic of both of us want to have some definition, some strength, feel good about ourselves. Where do I go to get that from my nutrition specifically? And is that too much of a vague question? But there's so many people that want that, because other people might want stuff to have different areas of fitness, different areas of health. But if you just use that as an example, protein, which protein, whey, plant-based and so on, it's a complete minefield.
Firstly, I'm going to upset the audience here, and then I promise I'll make it clearer at the end. Okay. Nutrition is complex, and we need to accept that it's complex. As humans, we like simple answers to highly complex issues, and unfortunately, the world doesn't work that way. However, and this is a phrase from the book, nutrition science isn't rocket science. Sure, I've got good knowledge. I've got 30 years. There are other academics that have got huge knowledge in a fairly narrow part of nutrition, and that's great. We need that. But for most people, you just have a bit of splattering of knowledge. You have to know what sort of foods you should choose, and so maybe I can help a bit there. Okay, don't get too hung up on it, right? Just eat good food. Now, we all kind of know what good food is, and there's a lot of polarization in the nutrition field on social media at the moment. And I'm going to make a claim that I actually can't back up, but it's intuitively this feels right. Nutrition is more polarizing than politics. And if you look at some of the social media influencers who are evangelical about their diet ideology, and ideology is exactly the right word. In fact, that brings me to a term that I introduce in the book called dietology, a portmanteau of diet and ideology. And there's a lot I've written about that. And it's important because they have their way of thinking, and maybe they've had some health issues in the past and they've changed their diet this way and it's helped them. They want to tell the world, they want to share it. And a lot of respects, this comes from a good place. I'm not convinced it does with everybody. And they want to share this information. But actually, they're doing more harm than good. How can they be if they're telling people to eat good food or real food, whatever real food means? But it's confusing, and there's people who have other pressures, and maybe this sort of dietary approach doesn't work for them because we're complex beings. We're complex physiologically. We've got different genetics. and we've brought up in different ways, and that can affect our physiology. But we've got different culturally as well. Now, let me tell you about the word culture that most people don't know here. The etymology of the word culture, where does it come from? It's very similar to two other words, agriculture and cultivate. And the word culture literally means the tilling of the land or the acquisition of food from the land. So the key here, the actual word culture comes from food. When we use it more widely in how we behave, how we dress, how we dance maybe, and then there's work culture. You've got a very good culture here at Jack, right? But the word actually comes from the food. So you can see why we're emotionally invested in why we eat, why people get so ideological about the food I eat, right? Because historically, for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years even, that's our culture. And it's manifesting into the modern way of thinking. And cultivate obviously means take food from the land. Agriculture literally means field, from culture, field of food. So I think when you acknowledge that, it does become a bit clearer, and you can perhaps become a bit more empathetic to people who are putting out this misinformation. This is where I was going wrong a couple of years ago, getting so frustrated with this misinformation. I still do. I still can't help it but if you look at the motivations behind the individuals putting out bad information, you can understand it a bit more. And if you want to combat this, you have to understand why people are behaving like this. Now, if your question is now going to be, well, how do we try and minimise it? That's a bigger
that's a rabbit hole. I've actually thought of lots of questions just listening to you then, including someone who's filmed on Extraordinary Stories, actually, Jim Mellon, who is the biggest investor in the world in kind of cellular farming. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so I know this is something that sort of longevity, if you like, living longer and better. And the fact that it's unsustainable to carry on this deforestation and farming as you know it. And of course the cruelty to animals that comes in. So it opens up, that's a whole chasm of.
And that's covered in the book in quite a good detail together.
I'll find that really interesting. And I think what I wanted to ask you out of a number of questions was the whole eating bacon and egg in a few years' time made cell from cell, if you like, from the animals to then be made in a lab. Mm-hmm. Where do you sit with that? Because I know a lot of people, when I've had these conversations, like, I'm not doing that, I won't do that. But actually, is that the future?
I think it has to be the future. It's a short answer. Okay, people are going to be looking at it, go, oh, of course you're going to say that. You create a food that's in that sort of world. Well, I don't, but we need multiple technologies to combat the increasing strain on the food system. Now, you use the word longevity there, and a lot of people think of the word longevity in the individual sense, like what can I do for my health to help me? We think a very me-focused world. Perspective.
Very human selfishness.
Yes. In the West, we have a very individualistic culture. Individualism, especially in America, but even in Western Europe as well, where it's very me-focused. It's about what can I do to be better? And there's a lot of positives of this. In the East, in say Vietnam, Cambodia, China, Japan, it's more we-focused. Collectivism is the philosophical perspective here. Now, I'm glad I've grown up in an individualist culture. If you look at the statistics, there's generally higher standards of living and people doing better and living well older, generally. But I think we need to be a little bit less me-focused and a little bit more we-focused. Now, talking about the cellular ag that you've alluded to there, some people say, well, that's not real food. Well, why isn't it? What's the difference? But the meat they're getting is from intensively farmed animals. Let's take the ethics aside of it, which I'm really very uncomfortable with. But let's take about the fact that they're given drugs, especially antibiotics, which is contributing massively to antibiotic resistance. In fact, at least 80-90% of the antibiotics used are in animals, not in humans. And sometimes growth hormones as well. And also, what are these animals fed? They're not fed the diets they've evolved to have. So are you actually getting proper meat anyway? Now, if you're one of those people out there that's fortunate enough to hunt game, or to get your meat from proper free-range farms where the animals are treated as well as can be, and I realise that's a can of worms that we're not going to go down because it's up, ethics. The very word ethics is up for subjectively interpreted in different ways. So how, we've got 8.1 billion people on this planet. Nearly, and rising. And experts say we're probably going to get to 9-10 billion before it levels off. I don't know about this sort of thing, but how are we going to do that? And we're very fortunate here that we can sit and go, I'm not having that. And you can go out there and choose and afford to buy foods that are a bit more expensive. Most people can't. and I mean that in the wider
It's
world.
it's a privileged decision making.
It's privileged decision making, and
Yeah,
it's even people locally. We don't have to go as far as other countries. We recently had a cost of living crisis, and it's not just the financial either. It's the skills to cook food, and people say, well, that's the onus on the individual. Is it? If that individual has grown up with parents who have struggled and haven't taught them the right skills, is that the fault of the individual? Maybe there's a single parent working 2 jobs, then their children, how are they going to teach their children? And we've got to look at it broader here.
Yeah, let alone the environment, right?
Yeah.
The actual impact on the
The
environment.
impact individuals. So we need to embrace these technologies as part of future foods. Not only, with Huel we do complete foods. Then you've got GMOs, and that's a can of worms as well. But and I'm not saying these things shouldn't be regulated. They absolutely must be regulated in the right way by the right people with the right incentives. That's a bigger topic. But the cellular agriculture, there's multiple technologies as part of the system, the future of food system. Then we need to be embracing them. And it concerns me, the resistance that people are saying, really, really concerns me.
People don't like change though, do they?
They don't like change.
We've gone through so many changes that have ultimately been, but AI is amongst us right now, and there's people that are scared of it, there's people that are embracing it. So I totally get that sort of falls into where this goes with cellular farming and agriculture. But another question I had when we were talking earlier that sort of almost make it really relatable back to us again, is if I am someone that wants to get the most out of my day, my week, my life, and we go back to the sort of supplements and what should I take in a day? So give you an idea, I take a vitamin D tablet, I take a zinc tablet, and I eat fruit and I try and eat vegetables and I have a mix of healthy food in my day. Is there anything I should be doing and anything you take that you swear by that just helps you get through your day every day?
There's no should or shouldn't. That's the first thing, and I want that to be underlined. Okay, that's the key here. I'm not here to preach and food. I have a bias here. I'm co-founder of Huel and the nutrition.
I totally get it. My question was more that is there a constant in people's lives where you should, it makes sense to always have this in your diet?
There's a few call-outs. So in the end of the book, I have 20 key call-outs, and not just for what individuals should have, but things that we can look at more broadly, like food waste. But some of those will include have a reasonable amount of protein. Okay, and don't fret whether that's animal or plant-based. If it is plant-based, you need to give it a bit more thought to make sure you're having different sources of plant protein, because they are on their own, they're incomplete, meaning they don't have the full array of essential amino acids. But you can do that. Now there's a lot of emphasis on protein at the moment, and it's hard not to, most of us are getting enough. Okay, it's not a problem. But there's a reason why protein is important. It helps keep us feel full, and it helps, and it's also got a lower caloric availability. Now, briefly, what that is, if you have, say, 100 calories worth of sugar, you'll use about 99 of those calories. If you have 100 calories of protein, you may only utilize about 70 of those calories. So meaning we can have a bit more food to help keep us fuller for less energy. So there's protein. The other one is fiber. We're in a fibre crisis. Probably, I think the British Nutrition Foundation in 2021 said only around 9% of adults in the UK are having enough fibre. Now, fibre is important for many reasons. It helps us keep our digestive system working properly. It can help give us a healthy cholesterol profile, reducing risk of heart disease and stroke. But also it's linked to cognition. We've got the microbiome, all the good microorganisms living with us symbiotically in our gut. They're sending messages to our brain. Now, they thrive on fibre. Certainly the soluble fibres in particular break them down to little things called short-chain fatty acids that are very good use in the body. But also serotonin. We're talking about mental health here as a key theme in Jack, right? Serotonin is a so-called happy hormone. This neurotransmitter makes us feel good. Now, 90% of serotonin is released in the gut. So that's interesting. There's a lot more work needs to be done here.
Your diet directly affects that?
Yeah, absolutely. Affects that. So keeping your microbiome healthy, primarily through fibre, there are other things as well, is vital. Now, one of those other things is omega-3s. These are the fatty acids. We're all told to eat more oily fish. Now, you can get omega-3s from plants as well. Not those two, although you can from algae. Algae provide the EPA and DHA. But there's another one called ALA, which is essential. Those other two are not technically essential because they can be synthesized from ALA. But you have to have a good intake of things like flaxseed, chia seeds, walnuts, hemp seeds, and some other nuts and seeds as well. And there's also small amounts found in a lot of other plant foods. Now, the rate of conversion from ALA to the other two is not that efficient, but you also don't actually need that much to be healthy of EPA and DHA. So if you have a plant-based diet, you can absolutely get enough omega-3s. You just have to pay a little bit more attention to it. And there could be, I personally do supplement, and Huel products are rich in omega-3s, but I do take a supplement as well every couple of days, which is algae-derived omega-3s. Now, what about carbohydrates? Not technically essential, people say. Well, yeah, I think they're maybe not essential for life, but doesn't mean they're not good use. So whole grains in particular, you've heard of the Mediterranean diet, and everyone's talking about that. That's associated with low risk of chronic disease, and that's true.
And they seem to live longer as well, right?
Seem to, yeah. It's the whole lifestyle, not just a diet. But it is rich in whole grains. That's the point here, which are fibrous and have got a load of other vitamins and minerals as well. And then they also have oily fish, so they've got the omega-3s. And so we've spoken about fats with respect to omega-3s. Now, that doesn't mean the other fats are bad. There's a lot of controversy here, but there's one other group called monounsaturates, which extra virgin olive oil is also rich in. So things like avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, they can be beneficial there as well, and just from nuts and seeds in general. And then just fruit and veg for the rest of the micronutrients and more fibre. That's great. Now, you mentioned vitamin D3 in particular. Maybe that's worth supplementing, especially in the winter months in the UK.
Especially being British, and there's sort of 5 months where you hardly see the sun, right?
Yeah.
So.
And sometimes those formulas come with vitamin K2 as well, which is a different form of vitamin K. The standard form is K1, and the two vitamins together have some synergy. So you can get concoctions that have got them both in. Might be worth supplementing. I wouldn't say it's an essential one, but it is, especially during the winter months, maybe worth considering. So they're the key points.
You mentioned fruit, for example, being really good for you. If I have a bowl of fruit on its own, no yogurt, no nuts, is that a spike in sugar? Because this is where you have these whole different viewpoints. So I've thought I was being really healthy, and I've always had fruit, and I've blended fruit. And then someone will say, if you blend the fruit, it goes into your system too quick, spike of sugar. If you just eat a bowl of fruit on its own, you get a spike of sugar. And you're like, oh my God, how can that be? These are strawberries and blueberries and all the things you read are good for you, but it's how you eat them. Is there any truth to that?
A good bit of advice here. Anyone that starts talking about glucose spikes, probably just turn them off, swipe away, okay? I bet a few years ago, you weren't really talking about glucose spikes and getting all scared about them.
I just thought I tick the box of eating fruit, and I've enjoyed it. Because sometimes you eat some food or have things that you know are good for you but don't particularly enjoy. I remember starting to eat bananas when I was younger because the potassium and all the things that are supposed to be good for you. And I've learned to just eat them, but I don't particularly enjoy a banana, but I eat them in my diet because they're good for me.
They're good for you, but you should, that's another thing, it's worth both ways, right? There's no food you should be having, right? You can get those nutrients from anything else. If you don't like bananas, don't have them, have other fruit. But for a start, your bowl of fruit is brilliant. Keep having it. People, the very fact you've had to ask that question just indicates what's so wrong with what I was talking about earlier with misinformation on social media. It shouldn't be a question.
You could have 6 people around a table and then you have a whole debate on you shouldn't do this, should do that. You're like, which is why I keep coming back to you. What's the right thing to do?
For a start, there's nothing wrong with glucose spikes. If your glucose isn't spiking, you've got something wrong with you. Okay, you have food, your glucose is going to go up. It's nature, it's biology, right? So don't fret about it. Of course, long-term, high sustained levels of glucose, that's not good. That's a risk of chronic disease. But it doesn't come from eating a bowl of fruit. Okay, it's just not a thing. That's related to exercise, how physically active you are, just your diet in general, how stressed you are. Cortisol is linked to more sustained higher blood glucose level. Are you getting enough sleep? They're all linked. The thing I want to talk about at the moment, how you eat and who you eat with, that plays into it. So let's not get too hung up on the minutiae here. Just enjoy your fruit. Sure,
And your journey as an entrepreneur interests me because I like the fact that earlier in this conversation you mentioned that there were things you tried and ultimately didn't pursue. But coming full sort of to date, having just written your book and being the co-founder of Huel that has been a roaring success. Did you feel that at the time? And talk about the journey of being approached by Julian and combining, and whether you got that feeling that this could actually be something really, really big, because that's ultimately what's happened, right?
So Julian contacted me in June 2014. We launched in June 2015. And I'd met him a couple of times during that period and I actually thought it was a good idea. I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. And then when we launched, I was just about to get married in August of 2015, and we went on a honeymoon shortly afterwards. And I was scrolling my emails. We'd launched two months by this time, 3 months. Scrolling my emails, and I said to my now new wife, I said, I think this is going to be the one, love. This is going to be, and I was right. I actually said, I think this will come out with a few $100,000 here, and it's done really well. It's been a global success.
Yeah.
And so I early on when we launched it, yes, I kind of knew it would be something big. Didn't know what big meant. Yeah, we actually managed to grow the business quite early by being very much community focused, having our core hooligans, as we now call them, and that's grown, and it's a lot bigger, becoming a household name. But early indications were, it was going to be pretty good.
Good. And what I like about sitting here with you now is there's a really positive vibe off you. There's a contentment without any ego or arrogance. But you've mentioned to me before in that journey of being an entrepreneur that you're almost uncomfortable being called that, almost like a bit of imposter syndrome. Are you comfortable with that now?
I'm not. It's not a question of uncomfortable or not uncomfortable. It's just not objectively true. Okay, and I have this debate a lot, right? And I've actually, one time I had to do an after-dinner speech for a bank, and they said, we want an entrepreneur to do it. I said, I'm not an entrepreneur. And I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? I said, talk about whatever you want. I thought, well, there's my topic. What's an entrepreneur? So that gave me my topic. And Julian is an entrepreneur. He comes up with the ideas, okay? I'm an executor. Sure, I'm not saying I'm not skilled. I have skills, absolutely. But I'm not uncomfortable with it. Well, I'm only uncomfortable with it because I just don't think it's true. And I've argued with this. Some people agree with me, some don't. Yeah. And I'll be interested what people think.
No, I really like the way you sort of almost countered that, because an entrepreneur to me is someone that takes risks ultimately without a salary or the safety net of a job. And so at some point you joined with Julian to say, let's do this together and let's see where it goes. That's kind of how I see it from an entrepreneur.
I'm not risked my time, right? But I had a salary, so I wasn't going without. I wasn't starving.
I get it.
So I did quit everything else for it, but everything else was going downhill anyway. So maybe this was the right thing.
I know you've watched a few extreme life stories, and one of the questions I like to ask at this stage of your life, again with a book launch tomorrow and all the things you've done, how do you define success, and how does the answer differ to, dare I say, a younger James?
Success is subjective. Success, unfortunately, this James, even 52-year-old James, will never see himself as fully successful.
Is that because the whole thing's a journey?
I don't know. Don't know the answer. I've played with this one in my brain. Don't know the answer to this. It's actually quite, I don't know. I said success, like if I'm training in the gym, just use a very easy example here, and I want to do a certain weight and get 10 reps, if I achieve that, success, right? That's an objective.
It's lots of little things. It's lots of goals that just keep going, right?
If I'm reading a book, and I want to get 10 pages in the next certain time period, and I achieve that, success. But longer things, I don't know if I'll ever feel successful.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I can relate to that.
To me, success is something that's objective, right?
Yeah.
I can do something, this is my break it down into my science brain here.
Yeah.
But other people might look and say, oh, he's a successful guy. I've had a lot of press coverage this week, and people have been saying, I don't like that.
No.
I don't like it at all.
I like that. I find that really endearing.
Yeah.
So on the small things,
yeah.
When did you last have a McDonald's?
I don't know.
Or a fast food, a food you shouldn't have eaten. And the reason I'm asking is...
You use the word shouldn't, and I don't do shouldn't.
Okay. But you consistently keep fit. You consistently eat well. But there's probably lots of people listening, watching, and I want to know, do you every now and then go, I'm having a pizza, I'm having a Burger King, and ultimately it's a blip, but I feel like it and I'm going to do it.
As long as they're true to my values. So I absolutely have pizzas and takeaways often, right? There's no, I have crisps, I do like a crisp, right? Or potato chips for the American listeners here, and chocolate and stuff like that. But I won't have the foods where I don't know they could be intensively farmed, the meat's intensively farmed. So I won't have Burger King or McDonald's from that perspective. I might go in there and have their plant, whatever they call it these days. I don't really like them, but that wouldn't be off limits. But I wouldn't have it because I don't really like it. Sorry, Ronald. But I will have junk food. Yeah, I have chocolate. I mean, you've seen the amount of mince pies I had over Christmas.
Fair play to you.
Okay.
I've got two daughters, 13 and 15. So there's an element of how I choose to live, and then there's an element of trying to pass information on to them. The whole crisps, potato chips, chocolate is often a munchies attack in an evening. Is there a right or wrong time to eat any of these bad foods? My point being, if you ate them in the morning, which wouldn't normally happen, you've got the rest of the day to burn it off. Is there any truth in that? Or because there's also the science that if you eat crisps at 10 o'clock, popcorn, watching a film, it's kind of, is it sitting in your gut because your body's slowed down?
It might affect your sleep. Okay, I'm not a sleep expert, but having the wrong sort of foods later in the evening can adversely affect your sleep. So that's not good. Not good for your physical health and your mental health. But from a calorie perspective or doing any other thing, yeah, it's not good. But getting the munches, you mentioned, or whatever the word
I mentioned munches. Yeah.
So
just that whole, like, you're probably not actually hungry.
Yeah,
and there's something, and you know they're in the drawer,
there.
or you could pop to the shop and get them. And should we go and get some?
We use a lot of words. We use the word hunger, appetite, cravings, and we kind of all blend into one, but actually quite different. They all mean different things. So the one thing I try and urge people to do is try and be more mindful. So the strategy in my book is called contemplative nutrition, and that covers a lot of things, but part of that is mindfulness eating, and part of mindfulness eating is the intuitive eating that people talk about, or even mindful eating, which is where people pay attention to how they feel about, are they really hungry? So what I just want people to do is just pause and think, why am I choosing this food? Why am I having it now? And if they are getting the munchies a lot and then just going straight and grabbing something, maybe don't. Maybe just pause. Maybe look at that clock and wait half an hour and then go and have it by all means at the end, right? And you've just taken control just a little bit and do you need, but pay attention to the feelings while you're doing that. If you really still want it after half an hour, I think go ahead and have it. But another little trick is, this, especially for people that are trying to control their weight here, is when you get those cravings, especially in the evening, this is an easy thing to do, just go and clean your teeth with a minty toothbrush or have a minty mouthwash, because we often associate cleaning our teeth with the last thing we do with our mouth at night. On the mintiness as well, freshens up the breath. Well, you've just done that. Maybe I don't want the cravings anymore.
You do not feel like eating after you've done your teeth.
You might do. You might do, but it reduces the risk, doesn't it? And
that's really, I like that.
There's two things there. Take control by waiting and then using minty and doing something in the mouth.
My kids are going to hate this episode. Yeah. They're going to work, if they ever watch it, that's where it came. I'm going to go home a couple of days' time and say, go and do your teeth.
Go and get some Listerine before you have that. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
There's no good time to end this conversation because I am so enjoying it. There's probably another 20 questions I could ask you, but we've run out of time. But James, I found it fascinating. Thank you for making time to talk to me today.
Thank you, John. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Cheers, James.
Cheers.